Hello everyone. This is going to be part one of our lecture covering chapter three, which is going to go over a good portion of motivation. We are going to revisit an element of motivation. Actually, within this module, we're going to talk about intrinsic motivation in another lecture. But today we're going to be talking primarily about achievement motivation. So for the outline for this one, the very first thing we're going to talk about is kind of a realistic view of motivation. We're going to talk about the 5 guidelines for building motivation. We'll kind of discuss why achievement motivation is important, but we'll definitely be hitting a lot more theory in this one. We're going to talk about different theories of achievement motivation. We'll talk about developing achievement motivation and competitiveness, and then also some implications for practice. So the first thing that we need to do is kind of develop a realistic view of motivation. And what we mean by this is, we need to not oversell motivation. A lot of people will point to motivation as the key thing in sports and athletics and exercise, when really there's a lot of other factors that may be going on. But to start out, motivation is a key variable in both learning and performance contexts. It is very important to have these if you're just learning new material, new skills, a new performance, whatever it might be. But also it's important to be motivated when we're staying in an activity program or some sport. So that way we continue to strive to better our performances or even see our own personal gains. Now there are some physical and psychological factors beyond motivation that are going to influence behavior, and that's pretty important. So in this we're talking about things like sleep, nutrition, what else? The coaching, the leaders, the leadership on a team, all of these things that really do not inherently affect motivation. Now, there usually is some kind of link, so if we had a chain, these things have their link back to motivation, but it's not a direct pathway. It usually has to go a few degrees or a few steps before we see some effect of motivation. And probably the last part here is right along with that, but just some motivational factors are more easily influenced than others. We'll talk about that a bit more. You'll see that as we're going through this lecture. So let's talk about the 5 guidelines for building motivation. Okay, so the first one, they discuss this a fair amount in the book, but situations and traits motivate people. So we can think of a lot of different situations that athletes and exercisers are put into that might motivate a person. Maybe it's the opportunity to excel, maybe it's some competition that's coming up, maybe it's just to see their own personal results. Well, those are all important, but there's also some personality traits that are going to influence how a person's motivated. Is someone goal driven? Is someone driven to demonstrate that they're better than others? So understanding the person, their personality, and understanding the situation is gonna help us better understand what motivates someone. Now, people have guideline 2 here. People have multiple motives for involvement. So this is pretty straightforward, right? So we need to understand why people participate in physical activity or sport. Okay, so how do you identify individual motives for participation? Well, the easiest way really is to talk to the person. Ask the person or the athlete what motivates them, but then also start to go a little bit further out into their social circle. So talk to their parents, talk to their friends, teachers, coaches, whoever, just to kind of get an idea of what motivates these people. Because that way, if you're getting information from multiple people, hopefully it's going to be consistent, right? And then you'll get a better idea of what really motivates someone, as opposed to just what they're telling you motivates you, or motivates them, excuse me. Now for sport participants, these are basically some of the top 6, and I don't think I have them in order here, but anyway, the top 6 reasons or motives for people to play sports. Number 1 is always having fun. Fun should be a core element. We hope people are having fun when they're playing sports. Sometimes athletes lose sight of that, but that happens. Ultimately, we want sport to be a fun environment for people to engage in. There's also improving skills. People want to get better at what they're doing. A lot of times there's a social element, so being with their friends is important. There's often there's thrills, there's excitement, there's situations that really you're just not put in outside of sport. Of course, achieving success is definitely a motivator for people. And then developing fitness. So you can kind of see these shouldn't be anything really all that surprising. They might be different for you. You might order them differently, but just talking about sport participants, people who are out there and organized and rec sports, these are the things that they're saying motivates them to play sports. Now, it's a little bit different when we're talking about exercise participants, so people who are just looking to be physically active. If they're just joining or beginning a physical activity program, usually they're going to report, well, it's for health reasons, which isn't too surprising, which can kind of go in tandem with weight loss, fitness, and feeling better. Although feeling better can be a little bit tricky because that can do with the person's self-image or body image, whatever it might be. But there's also this idea of self-challenge. So sometimes people begin new sports or new activities, new exercise programs just to push themselves and see what their bodies can do. So this group's kind of, or this grouping's kind of interesting for the joining element because we can kind of think of a lot of high schoolers and college students, right around when you get back from winter break up until spring break, right? So they're all of a sudden starting these exercise programs because, well, they need to look good in their swimsuit. So they're trying to lose weight. They're trying to feel better about themselves. They're trying to see some increases in fitness or strength, whatever it might be. Now, the continuing element is what's key. So we need to emphasize these components if we want to keep these spring break exercisers consistent or persistent beyond spring break. So again, we want people to have fun exercising. Usually there's some kind of instructor, so maybe we're talking about a Zumba class, group fit, those kind of things, Pure Barre, whatever it might be. So the exercisers begin to really form a relationship with their instructor and they enjoy interacting with them. Also, there's the type of activity. Of course, if you're doing an activity that you really enjoy, you're more likely to continue doing it. And then, of course, the last element here is social factors. So again, whether it's being on a team, so kind of this group fit thing where you're all working together, or it's just the availability of working out with other people, that generally motivates a lot of people to continue exercising. So let's get back into the guidelines. So guideline number 3 is change the environment to enhance motivation. So the thinking here is not everyone is motivated by the same environment. So not everyone likes to engage in sport or physical activity when it's a competition. Sometimes people just want to engage in activity that's going to better themselves, okay? Or it's going to allow them, give them the opportunity to master some new skill. And that's important. So coaches kind of need to be aware of that, fitness instructors, whatever, because motivation isn't kind of or the way we put motivation out there or try to enhance it isn't always a one size fits all. Sometimes we need to try different methods for different people. Number 4 here, leaders influence motivation directly and indirectly. This one, we can think of directly how leaders, captains, whoever they might be, are going to influence motivation directly, right? Because if they are hounding the participants, if they're making everything about competition, if they're really taking all the fun and enjoyment out of the activity, then that's going to dampen motivation. There's also the element of indirectly influencing motivation, and that can be done in a number of different ways, but remember that leader is often, is on a team that can be the liaison between the team and the coach. So that could be, they could kind of influence motivation by giving feedback to the coach about how practices are going or what the team climate is like. But then, two, leaders influence motivation indirectly sometimes by the way that they carry themselves, right? So it's not always about directly motivating people, it's just how they lead by example. Number 5 here, using behavior modification to change undesirable participant motives. So the idea here in the book, it gives a pretty good example. So behavior mod is basically taking some behavior and literally changing it. So maybe we have a football player, a kid who's interested in playing football simply because he wants to destroy people, right? He just wants to go out there and hurt people. So the way we can change that or use behavior modification is simply by punishing the undesirable behavior. So when they're being overly aggressive and physical, and actually praising when the athlete's using technique or using proper form, whatever it might be. So the idea here is to move away, literally change the behaviors that the athletes engage in. So now let's talk a little bit more about achievement, motivation, and competitiveness. So the reason we need to talk about these is, it's important to understand what motivates people to achieve their goals. We've talked about goal setting, but what's pushing them to do that? Well, achievement motivation, in the book, it kind of lays this out for us. It's a person's effort to master a task, achieve excellence, overcome obstacles, perform better than others, and take pride in demonstrating talent. So it's really this motivation to achieve something. And that can be pretty broadly defined as we kind of outline here. It can be learning a new skill or mastering a new skill, having some kind of perfect performance, whatever it might be, showing people you're better than them. Now, competitiveness is a little bit different. So competitiveness is a disposition to strive for satisfaction when comparisons with some standard of excellence is going on in the presence of others. So these others as well are usually people evaluating. Okay, so competitiveness is really a disposition. So again, this can be a bit of a personality trait where the person's trying to outdo another person, make these comparisons with others while they're being evaluated. So that can be pretty important because evaluation can be shaped in a few different ways, because that could be literally just how's their technique compared to others. Maybe it's a coach deciding who they're going to keep on a team and who they're going to cut. But this could also be seen as actual scores, right? So this could be a tennis match, and you could see who's really competitive simply by the score in the game. Are they not letting up when they get ahead because they want to show or demonstrate to others that they really are better than their opponent? Now, achievement motivation, we're going to shift away from competitiveness for now. Achievement motivation influences really the choice of activity. So if you're looking to master a skill, or if you're looking to beat other people or an opponent, then that's going to change the task that you're doing. So maybe you're going to juggle a soccer ball a whole lot if you're interested in just perfecting your touch. Whereas you might do one-on-one drills, one-on-one to goal, if you're interested in demonstrating your competence or your ability compared to other people. Achievement motivation is going to influence your effort to pursue goals. I think that's pretty straightforward. The intensity of effort, again, if you're extremely driven by comparisons with other people, so you have this competitiveness in general, but you're also looking to demonstrate you're better than others, then that might increase your effort to beat someone. That's going to come through a little bit differently as we talk about the theories of motivation or achievement motivation, so I'll just leave it there for now. Also, this is achievement motivation is going to link to persistence in the face of failure. So depending on the person, if they're driven by learning a new skill or mastering a new skill, then when they fail, they'll look at that as an opportunity to learn. Whereas someone who is driven by comparing with others, they may actually not put in as much effort or persist when they fail. They may attribute it to something else. Again, that's something that we're going to talk about a little bit more in a moment. So what are some of the theories of achievement motivation? We've got need achievement theory, so NAT, attribution theory, achievement goal theory, and competence motivation theory. So need achievement theory looks kind of complex. This is a table in your textbook, but basically what we want to look at is we want to look at this first component here where we're talking about personality factors and situational factors. So personality factors basically, is the person motivated to achieve success, or are they basically trying to avoid failure? Okay, and you can kind of see how that's a personality thing. Does the person look at 50-50 opportunities as something challenging where they can succeed, or do they look at it as, well, I need to do well so that way I don't fail? So those are two different mindsets, and that's going to interact with situational factors. Okay, so what is the probability of success? What is the incentive value of success? So probability of success, if it's a 50-50 chance, then that's probably a good situation for someone, okay, if we're sticking with this top level here, simply because they're going to frame that as an opportunity to learn and push themselves to become better. Someone who looks to avoid failure is going to look at this probability component and say, that has a lot of opportunity for me to do poorly. So this kind of also talks about this incentive value of success. Is it that I'm going to learn a lot about my performance or about my skills, or is this an opportunity for me to demonstrate, failure? So those are some different things, and that's going to lead to this resultant tendency. So depending on how these elements interact will change how we move forward throughout this diagram. So are we going to approach success, or are we going to avoid failure? So a lot of times you'll hear this called approach and avoidance motivation. Okay, so is the person looking to approach situations that will provide an opportunity to succeed, or are they engaging in an activity simply to avoid failure? Are they trying hard, are they putting in a lot of effort, not because they want to succeed, but simply because they do not want to fail? Okay, so this is going to change what their emotional reaction is. So this approach orientation will have the person focusing on pride and success as opposed to this idea of shame, of failure, or something like that. Okay, so ultimately this leads to some pretty different achievement behaviors. So this is what we would call an adaptive achievement behavior. So they're seeking out achievement situations. They're looking for challenges, opportunities for them to succeed, as well as leading to, most times, enhanced performance. Now this bottom half here we would say is more of a maladaptive achievement behavior. So the person is looking to avoid achievement situations. So in these cases they're saying, I don't feel like playing, they might fake an injury, those kind of situations. Or they might seek out competition that is far better than them. Okay, and the thinking there is that if this person is way better than I am, if I lose, it's not really a big deal. Okay, they're going to avoid risk normally, so they're not looking for these 50-50 challenges. They're looking for someone that they can absolutely destroy, or someone that's going to absolutely destroy them. Okay, and ultimately, there's usually a poor performance, right? So even if they're playing against someone who's at a much, much lower level than them, the individual probably isn't playing very well. They're not trying very hard. The next one is attribution theory. So attributions, think of it this way. What do you attribute your successes to and your failures? A lot of people get stuck on the success part, but failures is probably a bit more prominent in sport. So the way I want you to think about this are these three elements of stability, causality, and control. Okay, so let's look at this diagram. So we have basic attribution theory again. So just think about what you're attributing your performance to. Is it something stable? So when we think of stability, think of talent. Okay, so talent is very stable, right? It's not something that's going to fluctuate a whole lot, but something like luck is. So if someone gets lucky out there, whatever it might be, that's seen as more of an unstable characteristic. If we're talking about locus of causality, is it something that we cause? Okay, Or is it something that we did not cause? You know, is it that I uh, slide tackled someone from behind and it resulted in a penalty kick? Or is it that the ref is an idiot? Okay, so think about that a little bit different. So is it something that is internal, so something we are causing, or is it something outside of us? Is it more situational? And then lastly is this element of control. So is the outcome or the behavior in your control, or is it out of your control? Now the book does a pretty good job of laying this out and giving you some examples. These are on page 64. So you can think of like things in your control might be effort, as opposed to things outside your control. It might be the cost of the program, or the cost of training, whatever. And the causality one can be a little bit tricky too. But if your performance is caused by something inside you, like your bad back, okay, or maybe you strained your hamstring, then that's something you might attribute your performance to. But if it could be something external to you as well, okay, so that could be, excuse me, that could be something, what do we have here? Something like the competitors that you're going against. Those are just a few examples that the book gives, but the idea here really is thinking about, is it something that's stable? Does it change a lot, such as luck and talent? Is it something within you, or is it something outside of you? And then lastly, was it in your control, or is it in someone else's control? So here's another take at this, okay? So if we're looking at attributions and achievement motivation, stable factors lead to increased expectations of success. If it's unstable, decreased expectations of success. Again, I'm not going to walk you through this whole table simply because I think they do a good job walking you through it in the book, and I think it's pretty straightforward. So definitely check this out in your textbook. All right, the next one is achievement goal theory, or AGT. So with this one, there's generally three different orientations, is how they frame achievement motivation. You can have an outcome goal orientation. Sometimes they call this a competitive goal orientation, where basically you're comparing your performance with others or how you defeated other people. So again, it's very focused on this outcome. Task or mastery goal orientation is basically linking to a skill. Think of it that way, or personal improvement. So improving relative to one's own past performances. So that's usually dealing with closed skill. So it might be with throwing a ball, kicking, your run time, whatever. So think about it as more focused on the individual as opposed to comparing with anyone else or beating anyone else. It's all about yourself and your own development. And the last one here is social goal orientation. And this basically just, the thinking here is that your goals are linked to being affiliated with a group. So if you see, excuse me, that a group of your friends or a peer group is out there, and they all play soccer and they're really good at soccer, then you might be driven to soccer, or have this aspiration of excelling in soccer simply so you can affiliate with that group. So here is another element of achievement goal theory. We can kind of think of how achievement goals and perceived ability interact. The book talks about this a little bit. Usually achievement goals, we're not going to talk too much about the social element, okay? In that we don't talk a lot about social affiliation. It's really focused on outcome goals and competitiveness, and then this idea of being task-oriented or mastery-oriented. So clearly these are going to link and interact with your perceived ability. So if you're if you're outcome-oriented, but you have this low perceived ability or competence, then really your achievement behavior is going to look a lot different than someone who is task-oriented who thinks that they're really good. So someone who's task-oriented, has a high perceived competence, is probably going to be putting in a lot of effort, have a lot of persistence. Their performance will demonstrate this competence because they've just been focusing on their own performance, these kind of things. Now, someone who's outcome oriented, so simply wants to compare with others, but really has this low perception of ability, they might not perform very well. Their effort really might not be there, because if they think they're bad at sport, then why are they going to put a lot of effort or persistence out there? So think about how these first two kind of combine, this achievement goal and the perceived ability, and then how it might result in some different achievement behaviors. So some keys to achievement goal theory: really focus extra attention on task-oriented goals. So a lot of times as a sports psych consultant, when we go and we talk with coaches, especially youth coaches, we need to emphasize to them that coaching should really value development of skills. Okay, so personal development as opposed to simply comparing to others. And that's really hard. I'm not trying to say that's an easy thing for coaches to do. It's not an easy thing for kids and youth sport participants to get into. But it is something that in the long run is going to help people perform better. Now, along with fostering this mastery or task kind of perspective, we can say that coaches should try to foster this as a motivational climate. And when we say climate, that means kind of how the whole team as a whole will interact. So we want it to have, have a team that really has this feel of, oh wow, they're really focused on their own development. They're not worried about competition with each other, or showing off that they're better than someone else. It's all about everyone developing. Okay, so those are more task oriented. Alrighty, that's the end of part one. When you guys get a minute, go ahead and move on to part two of our lecture on motivation.